Knowing when to use ing forms in English is confusing. Sometimes we use them as verbs, sometimes as nouns, sometimes as adjectives. You get the idea. How are you supposed to learn something this complex? My recommendation is to start by paying extra close attention to how native speakers use ing forms in their conversations. The best way to do that is through active listening. Today we're going to do an active listening exercise together. Our goal will be to listen to a real-world conversation and notice how ing forms are used. At the end, we'll use what we learned to write a short story together. To help us with this exercise, we'll listen to clips from an episode of the Real English Conversations podcast. The particular episode we'll listen to is all about adapting to the new normal, or in other words, how life has changed after the COVID-19 pandemic. The way it works is that you'll listen to a clip from the episode and pay extra close attention to any ing verbs. We'll work together to determine how they were used, put them in a category, and continue to look for more examples. Once we've added enough examples to our collection, we can try to use them to write our story. Here's the first clip. First, just listen.
I think one of the first places that we can start to talk about is something that we completely took for granted before as a safe, normal, everyday activity, and that was eating out at restaurants.
Now listen one more time with the transcript and really pay attention to any ing verbs.
I think one of the first places that we can start to talk about is something that we completely took for granted before as a safe, normal, everyday activity, and that was eating out at restaurants.
To fully understand what's happening, let's simplify this sentence. A safe activity was eating out at restaurants. Sometimes we like to give more information about the subject of our sentence. To do this, we combine a subject, something like a car, a book, a person, plus a linking verb. The most common being any form of to be, like is, was, or are, followed by a complement. The complement is the extra piece of information about the subject. This can be adjectives like nice, pronouns like mine, or even nouns like a good deal. An example is something like, the United States is a big country. The United States is the subject, is the linking verb, and a big country is the complement. So where does ing come into play? I mentioned before that complements are usually nouns, pronouns, or adjectives, but sometimes they can be verbs pretending to be nouns too. What does it mean if a verb is pretending to be a noun? Think of it like this. If you say, I am reading, this means that you are doing an action. Reading is something you are doing right now. This means reading is a true verb in this sentence. If you say, I like reading, you are not reading right now. Reading is not an action. It's a thing or an idea. This means reading is acting like a noun in this sentence. Back on the idea of complements, if you need to use a verb acting like a noun, then you have two choices. One is to use an ing verb, which is much more common and less formal, and the other is to use an infinitive, which is the basic form of a verb with the word to, like to do or to eat. While using an infinitive is possible in this case, it's much less common and sounds more formal. With that in mind, I'd typically try to use ing verbs, unless you're talking about a goal or objective. Infinitives do tend to be a little more common in these specific situations. Let's try some examples. How would you finish this sentence to add more information about what your best job was? My best job was making ice cream. Here, my best job is the subject, was is the linking verb, and making ice cream is the complement. Using the ing verb sounds more natural and casual than my best job was to make ice cream. No matter what you do though, never say my best job was make ice cream. You either need the infinitive with to or, most commonly, the ing verb. How would you complete this sentence? My goal last year was to run a marathon. Even though ing verbs are usually more common in complements, a good rule of thumb is to use the infinitive when talking about goals or plans. Last example. What should it be? One of the things I find difficult is understanding a movie in English. Coming back to our original sentence, we can see that a safe activity is the subject, was is the linking verb, and we use the ing form, eating out, as our complement. Let's call this category adding information and listen to the next clip.
We've got them completely closed for now. So it's something that I really enjoy here, and I miss seeing sunsets as well. We've got them completely closed for now. So it's something that I really enjoy here, and I miss seeing sunsets as well.
As always, you should start by simplifying the sentence. I miss seeing sunsets. In this case, you always have to use an ing verb with miss. You can't say, I miss see sunsets or I miss to see sunsets. Why? Some verbs work with objects. An object is the thing that you do the verb to. If you say, I like tacos, then tacos are the object because they are the thing that you like. If you say, she needs some help, then some help is the thing that she needs. This makes sense, but here comes the crazy part. If you want to use another verb as the object, there is no easy way to know if you should use an infinitive or an ing verb. It completely depends on whatever the main verb is. To make things even worse, some verbs let you use both. In our original sentence, miss is a verb that always goes with ing objects. How are you supposed to learn which verbs go with which objects? The same way that we're learning about ing verbs, by noticing how native speakers use them and adding these examples to your collection. Let's see some examples now. If you already know these answers, great job. If some of these examples are new to you, then those are the perfect ones to add to your collection. What form of these verbs should you use as objects of enjoy? I enjoy reading and baking. Enjoy is a verb that works with ing objects. Notice that the effect applies to both reading and baking, not just the first one. How about here? I can't stand talking to your mother. Here's another one. It started raining or to rain when I left work. Start is a verb that works with both ing and infinitive objects. Last one. I spend my weekends hanging out with friends. We'll call this category crazy objects. I wish I had an easy rule or a simple list for you, but this is just one of those things that make English difficult. The best strategy is to pay attention to what native speakers use with certain verbs and ask yourself, would I be able to make that same decision or use this expression in a conversation? If it's something that you think is useful but aren't comfortable using, then add that expression with the context to your collection. From there, you need to use these expressions in your conversations. You can learn exactly how to do that in my How to Learn Vocabulary video. Let's check out the next clip.
Okay, so let's move on to talking about traveling. Everybody that has listened to our podcast knows we love to travel. Okay, so let's move on to talking about traveling. Everybody that has listened to our podcast knows we love to travel.
There were two ing verbs in this one. The good news is that they're both part of the same category. The even better news is that it's much easier than the last one. Our simplified sentence would be, let's move on to talking about traveling. Both talking and traveling have something in common. Do you know what it is? They both come right after a preposition. This is a nice, simple rule you can follow. Whenever you use a verb after a preposition, it almost always should be in the ing form. What should this sentence be? I study English by watching the news. By is a preposition, so if we use watch right after it, it should be watching. How about this one? You should practice English before going to work. Before is a preposition, so going is the best fit. We'll call this category prepositions. Time to listen to the last clip.
So it's a very, very crowded situation, and it's something that's a little bit concerning for traveling right now.
Definitely. Going through security and all that area too. It's very close.
So it's a very, very crowded situation, and it's something that's a little bit concerning for traveling right now.
Definitely. Going through security and all that area too. It's very close.
There are two ing verbs in this clip as well. The first one, traveling, fits into a category we already saw. Which one do you think it is? It's the prepositions category. We're using it right after the preposition for. By the way, if you're wondering, something here is a pronoun and concerning in this case is an adjective. That means even though they end in ing, they're not an ing verb, so we don't need to worry about them right now. What about going, though? Is this a category we already saw or a new one? Since it's starting a sentence, it's definitely not coming after a preposition, it's not adding more information to a subject, and it isn't following a verb. Must be a new category. Simplifying, we see going through security is cramped. I changed close to cramped because cramped makes more sense without the rest of the context. It means there were a lot of people in a small space. Does the structure of this sentence look familiar to you? It's the same structure we saw at the beginning of this video. We have a subject, going through security, a linking verb, is, and a complement, cramped. In the first category, our ing verb was the complement. Here, it's acting as the subject. Normally, a subject is a noun or a pronoun, but sometimes it can be a verb acting like a noun. Just like with complements, you have two options. Using the ing verb is the most common and natural, but technically you can use an infinitive as well. This is pretty rare, and unlike complements, there isn't a specific situation where infinitives are more common as subjects. In short, if you're going to use a verb as your subject, the best thing to do is to use an ing verb. What should this sentence be? Learning Russian is difficult. Learning Russian is the subject, is the linking verb, and difficult is the complement. Do you think this sentence is correct? No, it's not. We should say speaking English since it's the subject of the sentence. We'll call this category subjects. Good job. At this point, you've collected examples from 4 different categories of ing verbs. Time to write our story. I'll read it out loud and give you some time to figure out if you should use an ing verb in the blanks. Here we go. How has life changed for you during the pandemic? Well, getting a haircut is a lot more difficult, that's for sure. Ha, well, you might want to get one before going on your next date. A date in a pandemic? couldn't find anyone before people were afraid to leave their homes. I know what you mean. It's even harder now that the dating scene is just texting and video calls. Yeah, I miss meeting people in person. You just don't get to know someone as well online. I agree. Although I definitely enjoy not having to commute to work. You can say that again. Great job. Now that you've spent some time digging into the details of ing forms, you'll notice them more often. There are more uses than what we covered today, so when you start to see ing in content you listen to, ask yourself, does it make sense why they used it here? If you're not sure, it'll be time to dig into the details once again. I want to give a special thanks to the Real English Conversations podcast for letting me use their content in this video. Real English Conversations is a fun English podcast that helps you improve your English conversation skills while listening to entertaining conversations about everyday topics in American English. It's a great way to learn new vocabulary, hear about American culture, and get additional language learning tips. You can find them on iTunes and Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or directly on their website at realenglishconversations.com. If you liked this video, be sure to click like and subscribe below, and head over to deliberateenglish.com where you can learn even more techniques like this to help improve your English. Have a good one.